Remember Larry Nance Jr.? He was formerly a Cleveland Cavalier and got traded to the Portland Trail Blazers. Didn't spend much time here. I really liked him as a player, but then got shipped off to New Orleans in the CJ McCollum trade and has been relatively hurt since then. But despite him being gone, the trade that brought Larry Nance Jr. to Portland still has ramifications today. That initial trade was a 3-team deal in which Lauri Markkanen got sent from the Bulls to the Cavs. Larry Nance Jr. got sent from the Cavs to the Blazers, and the Blazers sent Derrick Jones Jr. as well as a first-round pick to the Chicago Bulls. Now, this trade had some multiple aspects to it. The Lauri Markkanen part of the deal was a sign-and-trade. The Cavs, of course, have since moved off him for Donovan Mitchell, and Markkanen's become a star in Utah. But the other interesting part was the first-round pick that the Portland Trail Blazers gave to Chicago in this deal. As when Portland traded the pick, it had a certain set of protections on it. Portland traded their 2022 first-round pick to Chicago, protected for picks 1 to 14 in 2022, 1 to 14 in 2023, 1 to 14 in 2024, in 2025, in 2026, in 2027, and in 2028. It's rare to see protections go on this long, but protections are there for a reason, and we've seen that reason play out the past couple of years. As because the draft pick was protected for picks 1 to 14 the past 2 years, and the Blazers ended up in the lottery with the 7th pick and then the 3rd pick the past couple of years, the Blazers didn't end up trading that pick to Chicago. And that's what protections are for. They're to help protect a team from giving up too valuable of a draft pick in a trade that doesn't call for it. Larry Nance Jr. is not worth the 7th overall pick or the 3rd overall pick, and that's why Portland was able to negotiate these protections with Chicago. Had the pick been unprotected or only top 5 protected, then the Blazers would have traded it in 2022 to Chicago instead of having the 7th pick to draft Shaedon Sharpe. And with Portland getting the 3rd pick this year, the Blazers still have not conveyed the first-round pick that they owe to the Chicago Bulls. Now, that 2022 first-round pick is a 2024 first-round pick that is owed to the Chicago Bulls. As each year the pick ends up in the lottery, the Blazers keep it and then own next year's pick. Every set of draft pick protections has a scenario that is laid out in case the pick falls in the protected range and the original team keeps it. Sometimes you'll see picks that are protected from 1 to 10, and if they fall in that range, that team instead trades 2 future second-round picks. As an example, the Blazers had the 23rd pick this year from the New York Knicks. However, when the Blazers traded for it, the Knicks still had a chance of ending up in the lottery. That Knicks first-round pick to Portland was protected for picks 1 to 14, and if the Knicks fell in that range, they were instead going to owe Portland 4 second-round picks. You also had an interesting scenario play out last year in the CJ McCollum trade, where the New Orleans Pelicans had already traded their first-round pick to the Charlotte Hornets. However, it was lottery protected. The Hornets would only get it if it was between picks 15 and 30. The Pelicans, still owning the rights to their own pick between 1 and 14, traded a portion of that section to the Portland Trail Blazers. For trading McCollum to New Orleans, the Blazers would get the Pelicans' first-round pick if it fell between picks 5 and 14. If it jumped up into the top 4 in the lottery, the Pelicans got to keep it, and then if the Pelicans made the playoffs, of course, it would fall out of the top 14, and the Charlotte Hornets would get it. At the time, the Pelicans had something like the 8th overall pick, so there was some confidence that this could convey, but after a hot late season run and 2 play-in wins, the final of which saw the Clippers' Paul George out with COVID and the Pelicans winning that game, the Pelicans ended up making the playoffs, and that pick became the 15th pick and therefore got sent to Charlotte instead of Portland. For the Portland part of this deal, the backup for the protections on this pick was that if it didn't fall between 5 and 14 and didn't get conveyed to Portland, Portland would instead get a 2025 Milwaukee Bucks first-round pick that the Pelicans already had. The Blazers then took the pick that they got back instead and flipped it for Jeremy Grant, so in the end, it wasn't such a bad thing. But what's funny is the Pelicans still had the 8th overall pick in that draft. They just got it from the Lakers. And it was an extreme frustration of mine that the Pelicans first round pick that was owed to Portland if it was between 5 and 14 didn't turn into the Lakers first round pick owed to Portland if it was between 5 and 14. Seems like that would have made a lot of sense, as the Pelicans were already willing to trade something like the 8th overall pick for CJ McCollum. That's where their pick was at the time when they made that deal, and there was a very legitimate chance that it stayed there. So with the Pelicans getting the Lakers 8th overall pick, I thought that should have been the backup protection. I thought the Blazers shouldn't have gotten screwed for CJ McCollum helping the Pelicans make the playoffs. Now, hopefully if you've ever been confused about pick protections, this helped clear the air for you. Because as we double back to the 2024 first round pick owed to Chicago, the protections on this pick are limiting the Blazers' ability to trade future first round picks. Since the 2024 first owed to Chicago is lottery protected through 2028, Portland can't easily trade any of their first round picks in those years. The Blazers could strike a deal with a team where they say that they will trade a first 2 years after their first ends up going to Chicago. We've seen other teams do this. However, if Portland's in the lottery multiple years, there's no guarantee that this first would convey, and it becomes very hard to trade 2 firsts in that scenario because Portland would have to trade 1 2 years after and 1 4 years after, and it just gets really complicated, and there is a limit in terms of how far out you can trade first round picks. Right now it's 2029, starting in free agency that becomes 2030. Now there's another rule regarding draft picks that is very important, and that's called the Stepian Rule. Basically, it doesn't allow teams to trade first round picks in back-to-back years. Each team in the league has to have at least 1 guaranteed first round pick every 2 seasons. As an example, a team couldn't have 0 2025 first round picks and then in 2026 have a first but have protections on it where it might go to another team because they aren't guaranteed to get that first round pick. While you could say they have a first in 2026, there is a chance, depending on how that pick plays out, that that team wouldn't have a first in back-to-back years and therefore is against the rules. That is not possible for a team to do. They have to have 1 guaranteed first round pick every 2 seasons. So if the 2024 first round pick owed to Chicago was unprotected, the Blazers could not trade a 2025 first round pick. They would have to trade a first round pick in 2026. That's why if the Blazers tried to trade a future first, they'd have to word it as conveying 2 years after the Blazers trade a first round pick to Chicago. Because if it's 2 years after, it doesn't violate the Stepian Rule, and the Blazers don't essentially know when they're trading the first round pick to Chicago. It could be next year if the Blazers make the playoffs. It could be in 2027. So these protections effectively limit the future first that Portland can trade. But there is a workaround around it. The Blazers can go to the Chicago Bulls and renegotiate the protections on said pick. Or they can go to Chicago and outright trade for the pick back. Let's start with that scenario. The Blazers with the 23rd pick in this year's draft could go to the Chicago Bulls and offer that 23rd pick for their 2024 first round pick back from Chicago. Then they wouldn't have any future protections to muddy the waters, and they would have all their future firsts back. They could then, in a trade a 2024 first, a 2026 first, a 2028 first, and a 2030 first if they wanted to. And normally when teams do this, those picks are unprotected because normally you're only trading that many first round picks if it's for a true legitimate star. Or Rudy Gobert. Or DeJounte Murray. Because that's what the Timberwolves, the Hawks, and the Cleveland Cavaliers have done in the past year for Gobert, Murray, and the Cavs did it for Donovan Mitchell. We've also seen the Phoenix Suns do it for Kevin Durant. All those first-round picks that the Suns traded to the Nets are unprotected. So by simply trading 23 to Chicago for their first-round pick back, the Blazers could open up 4 future firsts that they could trade. Now the other scenario is Portland could go to Chicago and reduce the protections on the 2024 first they owe them. Maybe it's protected 1 to 6 or 1 to 8 in 2024, and then if it doesn't convey to Chicago, Portland owes 5 future second round picks or something. That is a potential reason why the Blazers did indeed get 5 second-round picks back for Gary Payton II. There's a legitimate chance they try and use those to incentivize Chicago to change the protections on the 2024 first that's owed to them. And then since the first-round pick could only convey in 2024, then the Blazers could easily go out and trade 2026 and 2028 and 2030 starting in free agency. Now, if you couple those 3 future firsts with the 23rd overall pick, It's the same thing. It's 4 first-round picks in a trade. So in some scenarios, it might not really matter if Portland gets their 2024 first back, or if they just reduce the protections on it. And it sounds like Portland has had talks with Chicago regarding these scenarios. If Portland has a really good offseason and is looking like a team that will make the playoffs, then it's likely that Chicago just accepts reduced odds, and Portland is willing to allow that to happen. Because if the Blazers make the playoffs and have the 21st pick, what does it matter reducing the protections from 14 to 8 or 6 or 4. Now, you never know what could happen in a season. Injuries could happen, teams can fall apart. That's why you protect first-round picks in the first place. I mean, just look at the Blazers this year after their hot start where they looked like maybe they could be a dark horse contender. They ended up with the 3rd pick somehow. Things can change that fast. But Portland should have 2 options on the table regarding the first they owe Chicago in order to open up future firsts. That would give Portland the ability to trade the 3rd overall pick with Anthony Simons for some legitimate player, and then potentially be able to pull off a legitimate follow-up move. Maybe it's 3 first-round picks for OG Anunoby. However, at this point, Portland should only change the protections on the pick with Chicago if they're actually going to trade future firsts for a legitimate follow-up move. Otherwise, Portland can just keep those protections on the pick. They can draft somebody with the 23rd overall pick. I think there will be a good selection of players there. I love the prospects in this year's draft in the 20 to 35 range. I think this draft is really, really good from picks 20 to 35 or so. The Blazers could potentially get a role player with that 23rd overall pick. They could potentially get their version of Christian Brown, who the Nuggets took with the 21st overall pick last year and was playing legitimate minutes in the finals. And if the Blazers go into next season without changing the protections on the first they owe Chicago, they can see how good they are. And if they're a good team and want to trade future firsts at the deadline, then it should be a lot clearer where the Blazers pick will end up. If the Blazers are sitting in 4th place and are 5 games ahead of the 7th place play-in spot, then it becomes a lot easier for Portland to just reduce the protections on that pick, take away the future years off it, maybe toss a 2nd-round pick or 2 Chicago's way just for their trouble, and then trade future first and make something happen. So anyway, that is Portland's situation regarding the 1st-round pick that they owe Chicago. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comment section below, and I'll try my best to answer them, as I know this topic can be kind of confusing, but hopefully I did a good job of explaining it. Subscribe so you don't miss any of the upcoming content. We're going to have an NBA draft live stream. I've been grinding graphics for that, and I'm really looking forward to the product that will be. That'll be live on June 22nd for the draft, and then we'll be live for free agency on the first day of it on June 30th as well. So you don't want to miss those streams. You want to hit that subscribe button and leave a like on this video as it helps me out. With that being said, I'm out of here. I'll catch you in the next one. Until then, as always, peace out. Go Blazers.